What's going on, guys? It's Red Bull Tanker, and welcome back to Axis and Allies 1951 Global 1940 edition, Turn 3. Alright, so before we go into any of the, go into the Soviet turn, at the beginning of Turn 3, we rolled to see if Egypt and the Arab League would join the conflict on the Soviet side. You have to get a 2 or less for that to be achieved. Unfortunately, the roll was missed, and the Arab League has decided, or the Arab states have decided to stay out of the war between the Soviets, China, and the West. All right, going over to the Soviets. The Soviets had 80 IPC to... Whoops. They had 80 IPC to spend. Starting off, the Soviets did attempt... Since the Arabs did not come in, the Soviets did attempt to diplomatically influence Egypt. The Sato Alliance paid to block it, and it was successful. And so Egypt did not join, or the Soviets did not take control of Egypt and the Victory City that is part of that. They once again did research for AK-47s. That failed, so some scientists are now heading off to Siberia for the gulags. Let's see, they bought, come back up here quick. They bought a miner factory for Slovakia. They bought some tanks, 3 tanks for Germany, 2 fighters for Poland, and 2 mech in Romania. Combat. Alright, the Soviet subs off the eastern seaboard did attempt to interdict the 2 destroyers and 2 transports that were in 101. That failed, and both subs were lost with no loss to the Americans. Next, the Black Sea Fleet attempted to do battle with the U.S. 6th Fleet along with its NATO task force. The battle ended up going only for 1 round. The USS Lexington was damaged. And then 3 Allied subs, 1 American, 1 NATO, and 1 British submarine were lost. The Soviets ended up losing 2 submarines and 2 destroyers, and they retreated back. So that's what you have left for the Black Sea Fleet. Oh, that's not good. I just lost something. I'll have to watch out for that. So 2 cruisers are all that remain of the Black Sea Fleet. Coming over real quick to the 6th Fleet, there's a British destroyer, a U.S. cruiser, and a NATO cruiser remaining. I'll just say it now, because on the U.S. turn, the U.S. moved the Lexington and 2 destroyers, escorting her back to Taranto for repairs and to keep it safe from any Soviet air threats. And then finally, for the Soviets, they attacked because Iraq did not form with the Arab League. The Soviets just decided to go in and attack Iraq, and they were successful. Lasted 2 rounds. They killed the 4 units that were defending Iraq, and they only lost 1 mech in the process. Now, because they did attack Iraq for turn 3, because they attacked Iraq, so for turns 3 and 4, they can only buy 1 diplomacy dice. And for the next 2 turns, if they attack any subsequent neutrals, those neutrals will now defend at a 3 or less instead of a 2 or less. So the Soviets did take a hit for attacking a neutral nation. On the non-combat, they moved some forces into Turkey. They continued to push forces west, which, as you can see by what Romania shows, that was kind of a mistake. I'll admit I completely forgot about Yugoslavia, so that put a crimp in the Soviet plans, so they will have to backtrack on that. And then at the end of the turn, the Soviets collected 82 IPC, but they did lose 1 for that U.S. Land convoy disruption they had pulled on Albania at the end of their turn. So altogether, the Soviets collected 81 IPC this turn. Okay, over to the NATO alliance. Let me get my notes All right, NATO had 35 to spend. NATO attempted to diplomatically influence Egypt as well, and China paid to block it. However, it was a failure, and not only that, NATO rolled a 1, which means that which meant that China could have tried to influence Egypt on a 5 or 6, and the Russians will still get a chance if they want to try and influence it for a 5 or 6. So that backfired on them. NATO did attempt research for their own assault rifles. That failed. And then other than that, oh, I never put that on the board. They bought a miner factory that they placed up here in Normandy. Whoops, I did not put that on the board. They put a miner up in Normandy. They put 3 infantry in Paris, and they put 3 infantry in Rome. They did not conduct any combat. And then not much for non-combats other than moving some troops from Normandy into Paris, bringing that guy from Portugal up, and just kind of shuffling around here, getting troops from North Africa up to northern Italy as well. And so then at the end of the turn, NATO collected 35 IPC, but that sub up by Norway convoy raided them for all 3 of the Norwegian IPC. So NATO collected 32 for this turn. China. Okay, well, there's kind of a spoiler ahead, so you can already kind of see it. But, all right, for China, they had 40 IPC. They ended up doing their diplomacy for the Shan state. The British did attempt to block. However, the British failed, and the Shan state initially went to the Chinese. And then the Chinese, their scientists attempted to make a version of the AK-47 assault rifle and were successful. So China got on the tech tree with their AK-47s. Again, assault rifles allow you to reroll any infantry dice that missed during combat. After that, China dropped 3 tanks in French Indochina. They also put a... Oh, for the love of Pete. Oh, that didn't really matter anyways. So... Well, I'll have to resolve that, because they also bought a sub that I forgot to put down. So that's gonna change. That's gonna change 1 or 2 things. Or it's gonna change 1 thing later. But we'll get to it. And then they also bought. So they bought a sub and they bought a destroyer. Combat. All right. So for combat, the Chinese took their infantry and artillery off of Okinawa and grabbed 2 infantry from Shanghai, and they invaded Formosa, or Taiwan, as the breakaway republic is trying to call itself. So China succeeded in that. They killed an infantry and an artillery at the loss of 1 infantry for them. And then for their second attack, they did 1 round of combat against the Sado forces in Siam. Let's see here. Overall, the casualties were Sado lost... Where was it? Sado lost... Where am I? Oh, Sado lost 5 infantry while China lost 6, and then China retreated back into French Indochina. Now, one thing too, when you do unlock a neutral, those units cannot be used in combat right away. You can move them on the non-combat. That's when they like are activated, is on the non-combat, or when they can make their movements. So then, at the end of the turn, China collected 4 IPC plus 3 for bonuses. They got a bonus for taking Formosa, where they get 3 IPC every turn that they control Formosa. So they got lucky there and ended the turn with 43 IPC. Okay, over to the British Empire. Right away, so the Brits started with 31. They did diplomacy. Whoops. They tried diplomacy for Saudi Arabia. China paid to block, but it didn't matter because the British failed their role to bring Saudi Arabia onto their side. Britain put money in towards building assault rifles, and they were successful. So the U.S., Britain, and China all have assault weapons now. So that makes battles a little longer, but more interesting now. They also bought some units they bought a mech, self-propelled artillery gun, and a tank for London. And then they dropped 3 infantry in Malaya. Combat. So this fighter up in Norway attacked a Soviet transport that was in 127. Nothing was there to block it, so it automatically died. Next, their only other attack was they attacked the Shan state with 2 infantry and artillery from Malaya and an infantry and tank that was on this transport that came from South Africa. It was a success. They lost. They killed 2 Chinese infantry for the loss of 1 infantry, so the Shan state did fall to the Brits. On the non-combat, they continued to try and rush forces to Holland, Belgium, help reinforce Paris. And then at the end of the turn, they collected 29 IPC, and they plus 8 for bonuses, 1 being that they still control all their initial territories, and they still hold Transjordan, aka Israel, which, I mean, looking here, and if the Soviets are successful, they're probably not going to last much longer. All right, Sato. Okay, Sato had 38 IPC. They put 3 infantry in Siam. They also put a factory, which I didn't drop again. They put a factory in the Philippines. They put a miner in the Philippines. A lot of miners being built because that's just kind of what we've noticed with this game. Everyone's trying to build miners as close as possible to everybody else. So then Sato did not conduct any technology. They did not conduct any diplomacy. They just bought the 3 infantry and the miner. Oh, and then they bought... Wait a minute. What else? Did I forget to put the Sato purchases down? I did, didn't I? Because there's supposed to be 2 transports here off of Borneo. So, dadgummit. So I will have to update that and put those on the board as soon as I can. But so there are supposed to be 2 transports here. And then on the they did no combat, and then on the non-combat, this transport came down, picked up 2 infantry from Java, dropped them off in Siam, and then they did take these 2 anti-air from Wales and put them up there as well. Hopefully they'll try and get them over there as soon as possible. Actually, that was a bad idea. Anyways, so that was Sato. At the end of the turn, Sato collected 30 IPC, they saved 3, and then they got 10 for bonuses, which the bonuses include controlling all their initial territories, and then also having an outer defense of New Guinea, the Solomons, New Britain, and the Philippines, if I remember correctly. Yes. All right, so then over to the United States. They had a lot to spend. They had 75 to spend. They did do 1 tech. They did try to unlock the next generation of tanks, the M48 Patton. That the tests have not come back sufficient enough for the Department of Defense to deploy the M48s into combat yet. They did not do any diplomacy, right? No, they did not do any diplomacy. They just put an infantry. They bought an infantry, 2 tanks, and a transport that they dropped on the west coast. And then they bought 2 infantry, 2 self-propelled artillery, 2 tanks, 2 transports, and a destroyer here in 101. Combat. All right. Combat. Well, the Yugoslav-backed American forces attacked into Romania. That was... it only lasted 1 round. They also brought this fighter in from the 6th Fleet that had to land in Cyprus in the Med after the battle with the Black Sea Fleet. And and then a tactical bomber from northern Italy also joined. They killed the 2 Soviet mechs that had deployed there at the loss of 1 infantry. So Romania and the minor factory are now in American hands, which is going to cause some issues for the Soviets, but probably not as much as we are hoping. And then finally, there was already kind of the spoiler, but the U.S. did attack Peking and did that. Unfortunately, what I forgot that the Chinese were supposed to drop a sub here. Now, granted, the U.S. battleship did not hit on its offshore bombardment, but it shouldn't have rolled anyways because there should have been combat there for the one submarine. However, what I'm going to do instead is that because I didn't do that, I'm going to allow China to let its sub live, and it'll join its brethren down here, actually. So I'll do that. All right, so then in the battle for Peking, what ended up happening, so like I said, the battleship missed its offshore bombardment. There were 2 Chinese anti-aircraft guns. It was able to knock down a fighter and a tactical. The battle did go for 2 rounds. China lost 5 infantry, 2 artillery, 2 AAA, and 2 fighters that were defending the capital. And the U.S. lost 3 infantry and 3 marine infantry. The artillery was able to survive and take control of the territory, which put an extra 39 IPC into America's bank at the end of the turn. Non-combats, all the planes went back to where they could. The jet landed with the carrier, with a fighter. Everyone else went back to Japan. The U.S. is moving its ships in the Atlantic back and forth, as well as moving their heavy air transport, getting that headed back towards the States. And then, like I said, they moved the USS Lexington and its 2 destroyer escort back to Toronto so it can be repaired next turn. And so then at the end of the turn, the U.S. collected 65 plus 39 from China, plus they got 17 in bonuses, so the U.S. has a whopping 111 IPC for next turn. All right, well, that is it for turn 3. I hope the game isn't already over because of the Chinese oversight to protect their capital, but we shall see. So, like I said, that's it for turn 3, guys, or turn 3, and we'll see you guys next time for turn 4. So, as always, take care. Give you one last long look. Sorry, guys. All right. Take care, guys.